Editorial Co-ordinator for the Turkish newspaper, the Daily Sabah. Great to see you, Mehmet. We've had in the past, it's 13 months since the Assad regime was toppled. We've had extreme violence in the south. We've had extreme violence in the east. This in the northeast. How serious is it a challenge for the country?
Well, I mean, any of these separatist divisions, I think they're dangerous because the situation itself, since the fall of Assad regime, is still very fragile. It's still very sensitive because the state is in the phase of rebuilding itself, not only in terms of infrastructure that was destroyed by the over 10 years of war, but institutionally. And that sense of unity is being reestablished. So when there is voices coming out from the northeast and there is tensions in the south or the northwest in the Laskia area, these are all attempts to basically damage this sense of unity, this atmosphere of unity that is needed for the reconstruction of Syria. But in the past few days since the Aleppo developments, I think, it shows that the YPG has this unwillingness to meet with Damascus and solve or at least find some sort of common denominators to bring this autonomy aims to an end. So that unwillingness, I think, forces the Damascus or Syrian army to push them further and further to northeast, and eventually, as the U.S. is no longer basically partnering with them or supporting them, or they have basically scratched over their names, the YPG is now is left with no option but to surrender to the Syrian army. And I think this is not necessary just for the unity of Syria, but it is also needed for the Kurds in the northeast, for their stability and their prosperity. This is needed, and also for the region, including, like Andrew said, for Turkey is concerned. So the YPG is now, the stability and that unity in Syria is needed for the Syrians, but it is also needed for the region. And YPG seem to be the only obstacle at the moment. And this sensitive phase that we are facing right now, I think the YPG must acknowledge the reality on the ground is no longer in their favor, and they should stop with these maximalist demands that are not only hindering that unity attempts, but it will also they're basically right now they're in the phase that they're using civilians as a shield. They are also using, letting go, let's say, the Daesh prisoners in an attempt to draw international attention to Syria. But I think these attempts or these efforts are pretty futile because their main backer, United States, has a different vision for Syria's future.
Yeah, really interesting that you mentioned that the Americans essentially seem to have now abandoned the YPG, and they are increasingly officials in the Trump administration or those who used to work for Joe Biden or any previous president admitting in public that, yes, we used a terrorist group to fight another terrorist group. And you mentioned, Mehmet, Daesh. How serious is the threat of Daesh is prisoners escaping and never being found again? It only takes one to blow themselves up on a train in Berlin or London or Madrid, which surely will be their aim. They lost their self-proclaimed caliphate. They don't have any territory. How will they continue their terror campaign? It's going to be individual incidents. That's what Western intelligence fears.
Well, there is, you mentioned about YPG being used as a proxy. This is what proxies are. They are used and they are then let go. And I think YPG should have known that from the beginning when the U.S. was supporting them. And nevertheless, I think, that threat that comes from Daesh, individual, motivations or ideological motivations to blow up themselves as terrorists. We can say the same thing for the YPG terrorists and the threats that they pose to Turkey and the region. So there is no one terrorist better than the other. They're both terrorist groups. They need to be contained. And I think what international community failed to understand is in the beginning of this war, when the YPG was being supported against Daesh, they ignored the fact that these YPG elements are also ideologically linked to and organically linked to PKK, which is listed as a terrorist group by the international players that were involved in Syria, namely the United States and even European countries that supported YPG either politically or otherwise. So yes, the Daesh terrorists that are let go, they will. There's a fortitude. Special forces are now. We are seeing. We are we told that they are trying to capture them. But YPG let them go. Why? Because this serves their interest. So they are actually using another terrorist group as a shield for themselves. So when you take non-state actors, when you take proxies as part of an attempt to eliminate another terrorist organization, their predictability is very low. And what they can do to protect that power grip that they have, and this finds no limit. So because they are not a state actor, it's hard to also predict what they can do, what they cannot do. I mean, we're talking about the YPG, but there's the PKK reality. We're talking about this PKK-YPG relationship, but there is also Daesh that now YPG is using to shield itself from the Syrian army. I mean, it's a very complex field in Syria, unfortunately. But after 14 years of war, now there is this sense of unity, at least in the eyes of the people, which I think it's very important, and it should be, that momentum should be kept, and the terrorists should be cleared from all parts of Syria. But having said that, I think the civilian sensitivities for all the Syrians, be it Kurds, Turks, Turkomans, or Arabs, or other religious minorities, should be protected as the terrorist groups try to exploit that situation.
Mehmet Celik, really appreciate the analysis. Thank you so much.